This week also, I'll continue to talk about books on India. And the book that I've got today with me, it really tells the story of modern India. India, as we know it as of today, its story really began 75 years ago when it got independence as it parted ways from the British colonialism. And as that happened, India began its own journey. Democracy was established, and frankly, then there was no excuse. You couldn't blame foreign powers. You had to manage your own country. And how well India has done in that regard. That's the story of the politics and society of India, which the author and historian Ramachandra Guha tells in his book India After Gandhi. I read this book maybe around 10 or so years ago, but I still find it fascinating, and I keep going back to it whenever I want to get to a reference or just read for the pleasure of it, because the writing is also very good by Guha. But before you read this book, I will give you some warning. Those of you who don't know that the author Ramachandra Guha is pretty much a Nehruvian. That is, he kind of acknowledges, appreciates, and approves most of the Nehru's policies. And wherever he disagrees or is being critical of them, he will also try to understand what was the rationale behind it. So he'll always come up with reasons that kind of justify Nehru's idea. And for some of you, that might be a big red flag. Nevertheless, I would still say that you have to read this book. Whether you are a leftist or a rightist, it makes sense to read your own history and go back to the original sources, check the references, and then make your mind. Even if you think that author has his own biases, just like every author has, it's imperative that you check out their work and read it critically. That being said, now let's talk about this book. As the title goes, India After Gandhi. That means the story covers the journey of India after Gandhi was assassinated in 1948. That pretty much coincides with the timeline of India's independence. India got independence in 1947, and from then onwards till now, how well or how badly India has done, that is what we find in this book. And since India got its independence from the British, that's where the author begins. And he tells some very interesting points about how the British viewed India. For example, one of the Britishers who was a cricketer and a tree planter at that time, he said that after British, they leave India, that chaos would prevail in India. And these natives, they won't be able to run their own show. What a salad of confusion, he said, of mismanagement, of bungle. It's just not going to work. But as long as these people are led by us, that is the British, these people will go anywhere. So that's the kind of impression these Britishers had about India and the Indian people. And most of them thought that India wouldn't survive without the British. They didn't even imagine that India, with all its diversity, could continue to survive as one country. And even after the British had left India in the year 1969, when the British journalist Don Taylor, he came to India, he said that the key question remains Can India remain in one piece or will it fragment? When one looks at this vast country and its 524 million people, the 15 major languages in use, the conflicting religions, the many races, it seems incredible that one nation could ever emerge. It is difficult to even encompass this country in the mind. The great Himalaya, the wide Indo Gangetic plain, burnt by the sun and savaged by the fierce monsoon rains, the green flooded delta of the east, the great cities like Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. It does not seem like one country. So the British, even though they had left India, even then they had some serious doubts about India and its survival. And yet, here we are. After 75 years of independence, and if you look at it, this question that can India survive? Can India exist anymore? This question doesn't even make sense today. So that's what India has done over the years, over decades, in fact. And that's the story we read in these 800, 900 odd pages. So exactly that's what it is. It's going to be a huge task if you pick up this book. But I can promise you, you're going to enjoy this journey. And over these 75 years, one could argue that India's journey has become easier than ever before. Because when India came into existence, that is the modern political India in 1947, it got divided into two countries, India and Pakistan, and which then got further divided into Pakistan and Bangladesh. So the journey was a bit turbulent. So when India was going to get its independence from the British, there was the Muslim question. Some of them were looking to have their own separate country. For example, it's the Muslim League's leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He argued for a separate land for Muslims, and eventually he got that. That is Pakistan. So in his speech, he said, the problem in India is not of an intercommunal, but manifestly of an international character, and must be treated as such. It is a dream that Hindus and Muslims can evolve a common nationality, and this misconception of one Indian nation has gone far beyond the limits and is the cause of most of our troubles, and will lead India to destruction if we fail to revise our actions in time. The Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, and literature. They neither intermarry nor interdine together, and indeed they belong to two different civilizations which are based mainly on conflicting ideas and conceptions. Their aspects on and of life are different. But that is not what every Muslim believed. There were some like Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who said in the same year 1940 that it was India's historic destiny that many human races and cultures should flow to her, finding a home in her hospitable soil, and that many a caravan should find rest here. 1100 years of common history, that is of Islam and Hinduism, have enriched India with our common achievements. Our languages, our poetry, our literature, our culture, our art, our dress, our manners and customs, the innumerable happenings of our daily life, everything bears the stamp of our joint endeavor. These 1,000 years of our joint life have molded us into a common nationality. Whether we like it or not, we have now become an Indian nation, united and indivisible. No fantasy or artificial scheming to separate and divide can break this unity. So there it was, the challenge. Some of the Muslims believed they could not live with the Hindu India, that is Hindu majority India, which it was going to be. And some believed that it was the destiny of India for Hindus and Muslims to live together. So eventually, partition happened, India and Pakistan got created, and Pakistan then became the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and India as such remained secular. So the question of Hindus and Muslims living together and their ability to live together, it's an old one, and it still holds a lot of currency in today's politics, because I don't think we have solved that question. We surely, for the sake of political correctness, we do say that people of different values, they can live together, but then it creates those tussles that Jinnah had warned us about. For example, in India you have different civil codes for different religions, and that can create troubles. So the rights that have been accorded to women of one religion, they have not been accorded to the women of another religion. So you would want that the women of your country, all of them get equal rights. But then if you do that, you do have that you carry the risk of offending the religious sensibilities. How do you deal with that? We don't know. And that's the question, and that's the trouble that still remains. But the problems at that point did not stop there, because the problems were many. There were so many princely states in India, and bringing them, all of them together to form one political entity, it was a mammoth task. And still, India did fairly well, except in a few cases, and one of them is that of Kashmir, which initially decided to neither join India or Pakistan, remained independent for the time being. But as soon as the tribal invasions happened on the Pakistani side and the ruler panicked and a lot of chaos was created within Kashmir, then onwards we had a trouble, which we have not been able to solve even today. Because there is confusion and troubles right at the beginnings. So in this book we have a chapter devoted to this particular subject, and I think it's an important chapter to read, because you get the idea of the origins of these troubles, and they're not as straightforward, and there is no hero or a villain here. You see the complexities of the issue and how the two sides find it difficult to reconcile with this issue. So there were a lot of troubles when India began its journey. At the same time, because the partition had happened and refugees were flowing in from one country to another, civil war was taking place, and British had just left, and India was bankrupt literally. It was a difficult time. And yet India kept on working on different institutions, on its democracy, on its people, that were going to help it in the long run. For example, India created Indian Institute of Technologies, which are praised all over the world even today. Or right from the beginning, India held its general elections even when its population wasn't even literate. At that time, the literacy rate was maybe around 13 or 14%. And yet, people participated in democracy. Similarly, India created its constitution, which was an important document, and that too was an investment which was going to serve India in the really, really long run. So Nehru remained the Prime Minister for a number of years, and later when his own daughter Indira Gandhi became Prime Minister, that is when India faced real challenges to its democracy. As you would know, she had declared emergency in India in 1977. By the way, by that time, India had fought uh, one war with China, which it had lost, one war with Pakistan in 1965, and another war with Pakistan in 1971. In 1971's war, the result was that Pakistan got divided into two halves, the Pakistan as it remained, and Bangladesh was created. The war before that with Pakistan, 1965 one, that was another one of Pakistan's attempt to capture Kashmir, but it did not happen. So in the 1960s and 70s, there were a number of wars that India faced, and especially after 1971 war, where India really invested in Bangladesh and made sure that Pakistan got divided into two halves. The result was that India had spent large amounts of money on that war and did not have a lot of money to spend on its own people. This followed by the political and economic policies that meant by the early 90s India had no other option but to go for economic liberalization. And it is then the economy really began to change, more foreign investment came in, and India as we know today, the global market, that began to emerge. But on the other hand, on the social and political sides, there have been troubles already. For example, after the death of Indira Gandhi in 1984, who was killed by her Sikh bodyguards, there were Hindu and Sikh riots which killed a lot of people. Similarly, in 2002, there were riots between Hindus and Muslims in Gujarat, and that's definitely been one of the saddest moments in Indian history. So, on one hand, you'll find incredible diversity in India. You'll find in everyday Indian's life, and this is especially true for Hindus, that he or she will go to temple, to a shrine, Muslim shrine, or a church, or uh, a Sikh Gurudwara, or any Jain or Buddhist monastery. They'll go to all these places. That's really the essence of India. You worship everything that is out there. And yet, from time to time, you've seen these riots, you've seen these divisions between different groups. But that's just one of the contradictions, one of the many contradictions about India. And you'll find more contradictions as you read this book or as you travel through India. It's, after all, a country of contradictions. And therefore, one often wonders, as Britishers had when they were about to leave India or when they had just left India, that how can India survive? How can even Indian nationalism survive? And as the author Ramachandra Guha tells us, India survives because Indian nationalism has not been based on a shared language or religion or an ethnic identity. It's not at all like the idea of European nationalism. In fact, any definition you come out with for a nation, India will challenge that definition itself. It will come out as an exception, and yet it continues to survive and thrive. And as I said, that is not despite of its contradictions, it is because of those contradictions. It is because of them that India continues to exist. So India is not a communist country, but you will find communism in India. It's not an Islamic country, but you'll find Muslims or Islam in India. It's not a Jewish country, but you'll find Jews in India. It's not a Zoroastrian country, but you'll find Zoroastrians in India, or any other group, Sikhs or Christians or Jains. There are hundreds and hundreds of faiths here. So every idea that is conceivable to mind, it is in theory and in practice already exists in India. And that's why I think India continues to exist. So, a lot of things to learn from this book. And I would say that take out some time, relax, and enjoy this journey, enjoy this book.